Hello and welcome to Haul Around the World, presented by Crushing Comics. I'm your host, Crisis with a K. I'm here in my Wellington, New Zealand home, and to get any new comic books here, I've got to haul them around the world, because comics really do not start their lives here in New Zealand. Now, I have two comics today that have caused a bit of a controversy, a bit of a stir, and that is the X-Men epic for Fate of the Phoenix and the Conan epic for Hawks from the Sea. But first, we're going to talk about two other things in this haul, and then we'll get to those and why people were a little bit frustrated. I'll start with this X-Men Evolution. It's digest sized, as you can see by comparison here. And I know nothing about this book. I see that, I remember that it was a cartoon. It was kind of after my cartoon watching years. I still had a TV when I was at college, and I think this was on TV while I was in college, but I had classes during the day. I was watching cartoons, not that there's anything wrong with that. But I remember seeing an episode, because I think I was on a road trip with my friend Robbie, and her little brother was watching it on a TV. I don't know who else I hung out with at that time who had a little brother other than my partner, who I was in their house and they were watching X-Men. And I think I would have been considerably more excited if my partner's little brother was actually, he's my brother now, if my brother was watching X-Men, because I think I would have extolled about X-Men, but I probably was like, okay, I don't need to bother this poor kid on the couch. And I remember it had a pretty cool visual style, but it was a really interesting team too, because it had Cyclops and Jean, Storm, and Wolverine, which is kind of like the core four, even from the first movie, right? And then Rogue, who everybody knew from the movie, to which it added Kitty, because Kitty and Rogue in a team really doesn't happen all that often, except for, I guess, briefly in Claremont's Extreme X-Men. And Nightcrawler, always fun. And again, Nightcrawler kind of bridges that gap, because he was on a team with Rogue for a little while back in the day. People primarily think of him as Kitty's buddy, because they were on the team and they were on Excalibur. But then Nightcrawler and Jean actually have relatively little connection. And then this totally random other person, Spike with a Y. So this was the comic book series that went along with that cartoon, and there are 9 issues. It was from 2001. So this was around the same time that Grant Morrison was writing New X-Men, which I think is pretty cool. And honestly, the art in this looks pretty great. It's right out of what I've seen from the cartoon, and it's pretty clear and bold. The pages, maybe not quite as heavy as those Ginsu knife pages in the Arana collection, but if not, pretty similar. And that's because these are heavy on ink. All of the pages are black in the backgrounds rather than white. So already you know this is going to be pretty heavily inked. And it's just really full on, really digital colored looking art. And you need a really glossy, thick page to make art like this look good. Again, the kids are getting more durable pages than we are. But I think that's also something about this digest market, that there's a certain expectation for what these feel like and their heft when you pick them up. And you're probably competing against digests of all different things, Pokemon and whatever. And so there's probably a different production standard that you follow. So I got this for the kid, although I think I would maybe read it. That I am not that interested in AU alternate universe stuff, but it's interesting. It looks cool. And I'm kind of interested to see how they blended together the teams from these eras. Who wrote this? Devin Grayson, who if I'm not mistaken, Devin Grayson wrote Nightwing for a really long time. I could be mistaken. So anyway, fun to have it along. I'm sure the kid will really dig it then. And I guess that cartoon's probably on Disney Plus. I can't think of why it wouldn't be. So then she'll get to watch the cartoon. Speaking of Grant Morrison, who I spoke of a moment ago, I also have here Wonder Woman Earth 1, Volume 3. This is the last volume of the trilogy of Earth 1, and it's this really lovely hardcover that all the Earth 1 books come out in. If you're not a big follower of DC, Earth 1 is their Elseworld that's a little bit more grounded. Fantastical things still happen, but when they reinvent their core heroes in this world, it's just a little bit more of a modern, grounded take. You could maybe compare it to Marvel's Ultimate Universe, but it's not quite as extremely cool as the Ultimate Universe kind of often turned out to be. It's a little bit more imaginative than it is that. But all of the major DC heroes have had one. I'm seeing if there's some advertising copy in here. Batman's had one, Superman's had one, Green Lantern's had one, Teen Titans has had one. I'm trying to think who else, but that's not the topic of this conversation right now. So I remember reading the first one of these when it came out. I was a little wary of Grant Morrison. I had enjoyed their Batman, and I did not like their Action Comics. So I thought it was cool that they were returning to do Wonder Woman, because that creates the DC Holy Trinity. And I remember reading the first book, and I have a very detailed review of it on my blog, actually, back when I would occasionally do written reviews of stuff. that it was high quality, but I felt like it did the subversive elements of Wonder Woman, but it also did some kind of male gaze type things of the female characters. And I was looking at it saying, you know, these creators, as their names appear on the page, all appear to be male creators. And I knew that they were at the time, except for you don't know, because Grant Morrison, since then, relatively recently, has come out as non-binary, which is why you hear me using they, them pronouns for Grant Morrison. Now, that doesn't necessarily change that there's a male gaze in the first book. You can be somebody of any gender and create something that has a male gaze. It has to do with how you frame and reference the women in your work, right? But at the same time, I'm really interested to go and read this with a different perspective. And it kind of goes to show that you can't just assume everything based on who the creators of a work are and the knowledge that you think you have of them, because you don't always know their motivations. And this is why, for me, sometimes it's better to do Death of the Author, where you just pretend you don't know anything about the creators and they're all dead and gone and you're just reading the book as you read it. I think for me, it was that I read the book as I read it and was like, this seems like it's male gaze. And then I flipped to the creators page and I was like, not even the editor is a woman. But point being, I'm really excited to read all three of these, especially because we're in the middle of a big Grant Morrison Batman read, and I feel like I'm like getting to appreciate Grant Morrison more right now. So somewhere I need to unearth my Volume 1 and Volume 2. Volume 1 I bought in the States and read at the time. Volume 2 I think I hauled. I think there might even be a haul of it on this channel and I haven't read. So now that I have, because I was waiting, I knew there was going to be Volume 3. So now that there's a Volume 3 and they're all drawn by Unique Paquette and colored by Nathan Fairburn, I'm really excited to read all three of them and bring some different perspectives, both with a dead author and an undead. I guess the opposite of Death of the Author is undead author. I don't know. Okay. Now we come to the controversial books. I'll do Conan first. We'll end on X-Men. Here's Conan the Barbarian, Epic Collection, Hawks from the Sea. It collects to the end of Barry Windsor Smith's ultra classic run in this title. So it has Conan the Barbarian 14 through 26. Here, you can't see the controversy yet, but soon you're gonna. Ready? Can you even, I feel like I turned right past the side view. Can you even see that? Let me just random, no vision, pick an epic. I have Fantastic Four, Volume 20, Into the Time Stream. Look at the difference between the spines of these two collections, y'all. What is happening? Now, I will say that the other Conan book they released was pretty small, but not that small, So they really skimped on this one. I understand why to a certain point. They didn't want to just cut a huge swath of the Barry Windsor Smith stuff. Like they could have probably got like another 5 or 6 issues into this one to get it to like a normal width. But then they would have extended past him in the second one. And he's a big draw on his own. And I gotta tell you, man, this art is... There's a reason this is in my collection. It's beautiful. And for a while, the only way to get it was in the Dark Horse versions, which had new colors, which just didn't look good. The original colors of the stuff is fantastic. Now, here's an interesting conversation that people have around original colors these days. I saw a perfect page to put it on display. Let me see if I can get back to it. When you see a page like this, we'll talk about this black page in a second. I mean, clearly it's just there to balance out the pages, but just this page here. I'm going to come closer. When you see a page like this, and you see that it has bright red and bright blue, they were not that bright in the original comic book. No, because in the original comic book, the paper was a toothier, newsprintier, not as bright white paper. That green would have been that blue would have been a much more faded blue. Probably would have come off a little bit green. That red would have been a much more faded red. It would have probably come off a little bit more orange. So there's a movement that says when you put comics out like this from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and you have the original color files available to you, or the original camera-ready art, you should actually knock back saturation on the page a little bit, like 5%, 10%, because these colors were never really the original colors. You can see this if you've ever seen a scan, especially of comics of this era to compare against this. I've actually recently looked at a scanned page of a DC comic from the mid-80s and then the collected version. And it's like they're two different comics because the color saturation on the collected version is so incredibly bold, it like blows you away how bold and saturated it is. I'm not complaining because I still like these colors and the slightly oversaturated version of them to the total recreation of the colors that's not respectful of these blue and red skies that's in the Dark Horse recolors. So I'm glad to have it. I mean, it wasn't priced ridiculously for, oh no, it was $35. I mean, this is as big as like a brand new trade. This big hulking Fantastic Four book, which is I think pretty recent, this was $39, $5 more. It's so much bigger. The other thing though, as I'm looking through it is this paper, it's I think it's a little too glossy for this material. We've found Epic collections that have a slightly more matte, slightly toothier paper. And where it really comes through for me is on this page, this black page, that basically is just because this was the last page in the story probably. Yeah, and the next page was a cover. So they didn't want this to just face the cover. They wanted the cover to face in, probably to help with a double page spread later on. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this as I approach the camera, but this black, it's not a really solid black. I don't just mean the shine. Look at where it begins to pick up the shine. There's like a little bit of like a grayness to the page. And if I get right up on it, the black is actually kind of streaky. It's like the page wasn't thick enough to take all the black. There's splotches on it. And to me, that means that that paper just wasn't ready to take all that black. Maybe they shouldn't have planned black dividing pages to be printing on this paper. I'm not really happy with this. I'm happy with having it. I'm happy it's got the original colors, but they could have gone further for the same amount of money. And the spine is ridiculous. And I don't know that this was the right paper. Also, I've only had this for a couple of weeks and the cover boards are already looking curled. Now, part of that is just, the book having been pressed in a palette for so long. And before that, all paper that's printed on professionally comes on rolls. So it does have a certain muscle memory where it wants to be a little bit wavy. And you can sometimes see that like in the middle of a book, especially in a book. I bet this Wonder Woman book has it. You can kind of see that the pages, yeah, this has got it. You're not going to be able to see it, but the pages have like a little bit of a wave to them because they have a muscle memory. I'm not complaining about any of those things by themselves, but just on the whole, I can't say I'm really excited about it. Even if this paper has memory, I feel like usually cover boards are heavy enough that you don't get as much of a curl as quickly from them while they're just sitting out for a little while. Maybe if you just left it on your desk like this for a really long time, but I had it flat with other books on top of it, and then I had it on the shelf, so I'm a little annoyed. This was printed, by the way, by Fry Communications between January and February of this year. Now let's go to the other controversial book in this haul, which is Fate of the Phoenix. Now, this is the X-Men material when you're talking about classic X-Men. It collects exactly from the beginning of the Dark Phoenix saga kind of lead up or prelude in X-Men 129 through the issue after the Days of Future Past. So if you were going to get anybody who maybe might like classic X-Men comics, one epic collection, this is the one. This is one of the few times they have collected both of that material in full in a single book, especially a paperback book. Usually it's split up or it's only part of the Dark Phoenix saga. So this is probably one of the most buyable epics of all time. I'm hard pressed to think of an epic other than the first Fantastic Four epic that's as straight up classic as this. Maybe when they start to hit Miller and Daredevil, but even that will be in 2 epic collections probably. But there are some problems with this. It has some pretty thin paper. Now, I haven't observed this myself. I've heard people talking about it, that it's got a lot of show. Now, I happen to open up to this page that has a lot of yellow from the blackbird at the bottom. Usually in a yellow that dense, I wouldn't be able to see that much show, but I can see it on the closed page. And to be fair, it's pretty dark on the other side because it's Nightcrawler, who's a really lot of dark colors and blacks. I'm going to continue to page through. And again, show through is not totally unusual. It's just the nature of paper. But as you're reading, you don't want to totally be reading the opposite page. And there are epics that avoid this. I mean, even looking at this Fantastic Four epic, which is, this has got that slightly toothier, slightly more matte paper. I can see a little bit of show on the white, but not to the degree that I can see on this page with the Wendigo on it. But the other question, of course, is how it takes black. So let me see if I can find an all black page that's similar to the Conan. So here's an all black page, same thing, a dividing page. This does not have that splotchiness on it. It is a solid field of black. There's, I don't know if you're going to be able to tell the difference. I don't see any difference, cloudiness, streakiness in this black at all. So this paper, there's no way that this is the same paper as that Conan paper. There's just no way. It feels really similar, but there's something different about it. And I will say the color fidelity on the actual pages looks really, really good clearly this has been masterworked and omnibused already, so the line work is already as restored as it gets. It also has, by the way, Phoenix the Untold Story, which we covered on our Epic X-Men reread, that has kind of what the Phoenix story was originally going to be before they had to spend a wild weekend rewriting it. And it also has material from Marvel Treasury Edition 26 and 27 and from Marvel Team Up 100. Content-wise, I cannot recommend this any more highly. Not everybody has to like it though. Like Faria read it and she was like, that's fine. But some people are going to object to some of the portrayals. Some people, it's going to be too much narration. Some people are going to think the stories are too brief or not epic enough. That's fine. Nobody has to like the things that we all like. But if you wanted to get it for anybody in your life who's always curious about what you're talking about when you talk about these two classic X-Men stories, it is here. And then the issue that goes past those two stories that it has at the end there, 143, I think is the Kitty Christmas issue, where the Brood is chasing her. She's by herself. It's Christmas. She dangles a mistletoe over Colossus's head so inappropriately. And yeah, and then the Brood chases her through the mansion, clearly with some reference to Alien at that point. So, great book. The binding is fine. The pages are actually a nice, pretty bright white now that I'm looking at them from the ends, which probably helps how well they're taking the color. Clearly, there's going to be a little bit of that saturation issue with this in the same way we talked about in the last one, but that's just standard to every Epic collection. Nobody's going to fix that. And so I think the argument is just Marvel should have given this the quality of one of their nicer Epic collections. This is not the one to scrimp and save on. It was printed by Fry Communications at the beginning of this year in January and February. Look, I still recommend it, and I do think that the complaints about it have been a little over the top because honestly, the paper, it feels fine. It doesn't feel flimsy in my hand. It doesn't feel like it's going to tear. It's light. It's not the heaviest Epic paper I've ever touched, but it doesn't feel like a flimsy book. It doesn't have that spine flimsiness that we've seen, like when I pulled out the old Avengers West Coast Epic that was printed by that printer that we didn't like. I don't think that some complaints about the quality should get to you. Unless you're this person who's like on the fence about the general quality of the epics in general, then yeah, maybe they're not up to your standard. So that was a lot to talk about, y'all. I'm pretty excited about all four of those books. I'm excited to check out X-Men Evolution. I'm excited to finally read all of those Wonder Woman Earth 1s. I'm excited to have Conan in the original colors. I have read some of it. I read quite a bit of Conan when I put together my Conan guide, but I'm excited to sit down and read them really nicely restored with the original colors. And of course, I've read that X-Men material so many times. It's incredible. It's the bee's knees. And if you want to hear me talking about it, there are episodes upon episodes of us talking about every piece of material in that through X-Men 137 from our Epic X-Men reread, and I'll link that in the description below in case you have not seen that before. But until we get to talk to each other again, this has been Haul Around the World. Actually, I can tease the next Haul Around the World. This one really came around the world. It took a long time, and there's quite a story to go with it. It is the Infinity Crusade Omnibus. So tune in next time to hear me talk about one of the hugest omnibuses that came the farthest and is the largest in my entire collection. Until then, it's been so great to speak to you, and I hope until I get to speak to you again on this or any other show on the channel that you are well.